Okay. 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 So we'll give it another minute to have more. I just see very few people on. So okay, I'll start anyway because it's a long sikha and it's a little bit complicated. It's so anyway. So we start earlier for the finish on time. It's in Chelik Tes Vav. The first sikha the Parsha Vayeshev. Okay. Ismichas HaParshas from Parsha Vayeshev. The closeness of the Parshias from Parshas Vayeshev, in welches hebt sich Beloshen Rasha the Sipur from Yeshuva Yankev and Yeshuva Tildesov. The connection or the closeness of the way the Torah brings the beginning of Parsha Vayeshev, where it talks about what happened to Yaakov, Yaakov's settlement and Yaakov's happenings and children, etc., etc. The connection of that, or the closeness of that, we can see from Parsha Vayishlach with the end of Vayishlach, because this comes right after the end of Vayishlach. So, what does it say in the end of Parsha Vayishlach? In welchem wird erzählt the Sipur from Yeshuva Esav, where it talks about where Esav settled and Esav's children, Esav things that happened to Esav. These the Malch Edom, Baluf Esav Shalachreim, and even after Esav himself, it goes through a whole thing of who the officers and the kings of Esav are from generations later. So we see some kind of connection here because the Torah puts them together. So there is such a thing as smuchin, that if the Torah puts two things together, they have a connection. So here we have in the beginning of Parsha Vayeshev, it talks about Yaakov and what happened to him. The end of Vayishlach, it says what happened to Esav, and it's close together. And Chazal Mavayir mit HaMoshli, to explain the connection and why they're together. So the Chachamim explain it with a Moshe, with a parable. And this is the Lashon of the Medrash. Moshe to a king that had a pearl that was thrown, that was mixed in the sand and in the pebbles. So the king has to feel around in the dust, in the sand, and in the pebbles to take out the margolius, to take out the pearl from them. When the king reaches this pearl, in other words, he finds it, he leaves the sand and he leaves the pebbles, and now he's only involved in the pearls. So this is a mashal. So the same thing here in our Inyan. You cannot get to what's going to happen to the settlement and things that's going to happen to Yankov, unless you first tell, at least in short, what happened to Esav. In other words, the mashal is, it's just like to get to the margolius, to get to the pearl. You have to first sift through and go through what's with the sand, what's with the pebbles. Same thing here. Margolius is obviously Yaakov, and in order to get to Yaakov, you have to first sift through Esav. So that's why the Torah first writes all the things that happened to Esav and his family, etc. Then the Torah writes about Yaakov. So we also find this, the Medrash adds, we also find the same thing by the Asara Deiras Adam Adneach, concerning the 10 generations between Adam Rishon and Neach. The Asara Deiras Shem Neach Vad Avram, the 10 generations from Neach to Avram, as wegen Zayde Zeltman Vabasachas, Onke Narich, as the Torah talks about them, very short, just one section about them. When it comes to the pearl, which is Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Hischel Masasik, and we started discussing, and now we deal with Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. So it's the exact same thing, that Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov is like the pearl, and just like the pearl is found in sand, you got to first deal with the sand in order to get the pearl, so you got to deal with the 10 generations Adam to Neach, and then the 10 generations of Neach to Avram, and then when you deal with them, you're finished with them, you get to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, then you drop them, and then you continue with Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. The same thing here also. You talk about Esav. To find the pearl, which is Yaakov, you have to first go through sifting for Esav. So the Torah told us about Esav and his Yeshuvim, and then we go to Yaakov. Now from Hashem, the Rebbe says we have to understand. L'chura is the moshel, nit masim l'nyaneinu. L'chura, the moshel does not really fit here. Why? By the other examples, like the 10 generations from Adam to Neach and 10 generations from Neach to Avram, Gebaldas von Odom bis Neach is a hefsek. Since between Odom and Neach, there's a space in between, a time between. And what happened in between? As eine Gewera Sora Deiris, for 10 generations. Und Neach von Neach bis Avrom, von Neach to Avrom. So here we understand, darf der Teire ausrechnen, nach Kaponen bekitzer, alle zwischen den Deiris, bis man kommt zu Mikkel. Zu Neach und Avrom. So here we understand, the Torah has to, in order to get, let's say, Odom Rishon. Torah would just talk about the Odom Rishon, not tell us about the next generations. And all of a sudden, the next thing would be talking about Neach. You can't get to Neach unless you go through the other generations. So here you're obligated, you must go through other generations till you come to Neach. Same thing with Neach and Avram. You want to get to Avram, but between Neach and Avram this time, imagine if the Torah would not tell us about it. Say Neach and then talk about Avram. So you have to, at least the kids, you have to go through the generations before. As Zevi emotional, just like in the Moshel, as a yes, the Margolis is behalten in the Mofer. Since the pearl is hidden inside the sand, muss man suchen in the Mofer bis man gefunden the Margolis. So you have to deal with the offer because it's hidden there. So you have to get through, sift through, or as we'll say later, the Lashon of Rashi, through the sand, because that's the only way you can get to the pearl. Same thing here. The only way you can get to Neach is if you mention the generations between Neach, Adam and Neach. Same thing, Neach and Avram. Schenke Yankov, in our case, Yankov is of Bnei Shel Yitzchak. He's the son of Yitzchak. What happens suchen zwischen Esav and Esav, they to come to Yaakov and Esav. In order to get from Yitzchak to Yaakov, why do you have to go through Esav? That's not, Esav is not in between Yitzchak and Yaakov. So then there's no need to say that in order to get to Yaakov, you have to go through Esav. Why do you have to go through Esav? You go straight from Yitzchak to Yaakov. It's not like in the other case, there you have to go through the middle. So there the moshel fits. The moshel fits. You can't get to the pearl unless you go through the sand. You can't get to Noach unless you go to the generations between Adam and Noach. Same thing with Noach and Avram. But here you don't have to go through. So why is this a moshel explaining why the Torah had to talk about this? But then the Rebbe explains like this. The truth is, concerning the things that happened with Esav that had a connection to Yaakov. For instance, he says, with the Schapiro from Birchas Yitzchak, like the story that Yitzchak gave the brachas. Well, noch ich can sagen, in this we could have explained, as in them is Yaakov Kilo behalten und nicht gemischt in dem offer von Esav. There, yes, since it has to do with Esav, so Esav and Yaakov are, so to speak, mixed. There's one story that goes up between the two. We have to tell what happened to Esav. Before you get to Yaakov, you have to talk about Esav. For instance, you want to tell that Yaakov got the brachas from Yitzchak. So you have to say how it came about. So since Yaakov and Esav are together, so it's as if Yaakov is covered by Esav. You need to get rid or talk about what happened to Esav, at least in short, to get to Yaakov. So that could be only concerning the things that happened to Yaakov, which are connected to Esav. Afilo der Sipur in Sof Parashat Vayishlach Esav et Vazetz B'Kvis and Har even the story in the end of Vayishlach, where it talks about how Esav settled the Kvias, he settled in Har Seir. Kemen sagen with the Maral is mal, but here you could say, like the Maral explains, Ados is negated to Yeshuva Yanki. That is, to know about Esav's settlement in Seir is important to know before you get to Yaakov. Why? Well, Davke Norton the Esav at Eigenum Seir, because only after Esav conquered Seir, was dort besetzt and settled there. Is Yanki geworden der einzige Jerish from Eretz Yisrael. Only then Yaakov become the only one to inherit Eretz Yisrael, because Esav got his place. But also the Tachlis for Sipur Yaakov told Esav. The whole purpose, Bechlal, why he's talking about what happened to Yaakov and his children. So the Tzelim Yishuveim Yugaleim Achavod Leklal Yishuv, like Rashi says, to tell us they're settling and everything that happened, all the steps that happened till they came to the Yishuv to be settled. So since the Torah is trying to start off with Yaakov and tell him how he settled, so to speak, in Eretz Yisrael. So you first got to say, why is Yaakov the one that has the right over Eretz Yisrael? So he has to tell us first that Esav got Har Seir. So there you could maybe somehow explain why it fits, the moshel fits that we have to first talk about Esav in order to get the Yaakov. Or but Esav of them does his meeting ganz and Glatik. So first of all, the Rebbe says this is not really so simple. But from them moshel is muchach adim Margolis is behalten in offer modar from suchen. Because the moshel says that the Margolis, the pearl is hidden in the sand. And we got to search for it. But what we just said before is nor masim, so zognas is do a shayches. Oh, if it's these cases where the happenings of Esav are negated to Yaakov, so they have a shayches. It's not that Yaakov is hidden in the story of Esav. So here, at most, as Iruv Mishum zwischen Yaakov and Esav and Yishuv. There's a mixture between Yaakov and Esav. They're like involved in the same story. Aber nicht ausgemischt beifn as zu sein behalten in Yishuv Esav offer. But it's not that Yaakov's thing, even in these cases, that Yaakov is hidden within Esav, like in the Moshel, that the Margolis is hidden in the offer. And we soll davon suchen und gewinnen in Yishuv Esav. You have to find it inside of the Moshel. You have to find the Margolis, the pearl, in the sand. You don't have to find what happened to Yaakov in Esav. It's hidden in Esav. You have to talk about Esav because that's part of the story. But it's not hidden in Esav. So that's number one, why that shot is not good. Even when we talk about the happenings of Yaakov and Esav. Noch mehr nicht verstanden, but it's even more than that, not understood. The Pasuk Rechem to told this Alufi Esav and Yeshuvim, the Torah counts the children of Esav and the officers of Esav, and they're settling all the way going through generations till comes to the kings that they all were there before the first king. But das nemt arum das man Bishaol HaMelech. The first king by Yidin was Shaul HaMelech. So the Torah tells us generations all the way till the time of Shaul, before Shaul HaMelech. Und die Aluf Esav is eine gewähnt lach Hashem es Hadad the poskim HaMalchus, and even it goes about the Alufim, the officers who came after Hadad died, and then there was no more Malchus, etc. But by them, there is no mixture, there's no connection to Yaakov at all. So that's another reason why we can't say the Pshat before. If the Torah would just tell us things that happened to Esav that connect to Yaakov. So you can answer maybe. But since it tells us more than that, so obviously that's not what it is. So we're back to the question, even in those things, what's the comparison between the Moshel and the Nimshel? Why is it that in order to get to Yaakov, you have to talk about Esav? Like we got to deal with the sand in order to get the pearl. Because the pearl is hidden in the sand. You got to deal, you got to touch the sand and feel the sand, you got to do it. But what about Yaakov? Yaakov does, you don't need Esav. Yaakov is the son of Yitzchak. You can go directly from Yitzchak to Yaakov. It's one kash. Ich fordere sich dir, wenn ich gehe, kann man in der Moschel zu verstehen, was ist in Nimshel. Other questions, in look in the Moschel and see how it's parallel to the way it's in the Nimshel. Number one, Nimshel will say that the pearl is hidden in the sand and in the pebbles. There has to be something like every detail of the Moshel has to be fit to the Nimshel. What's in the Nimshel? These two things. What does offer represent? What does Seish represent? The second thing, why does he say that when the king found the pearl, got the pearl, he left the sand and the pebbles, and he's involved only in the pearl. It's self-understood. As we normally find the Margolis is the ganze Sasket normative. Since the whole thing is getting there, is looking for the pearl. The moment you find the pearl, obviously you're going to deal with the pearl, only with the pearl. But Gedacht stehen bekitzer kishegi amelech Margolis in Sasek. So the marshal should have been that he got to the. He's looking for the pearls. So you have to deal with the offer and the traders to get to the. When you get to the pearl, that's where you're involved with the pearl only. Why does he have to say he put away the offer and the traders? From the Arichas Haloshen Hamoshel is canting from the way the Loshen the Moshel is. It seems Aseich Nochen gefinnen the Margolis, that even after he found the pearl, kishegi al Margolis, like the Loshen the Medrash, he reached the Margolis. There was ein Apulam Yechedes from the Niachas offer. It says he puts away the offer and the traders. It's not just he has nothing to do with it and he doesn't need it anymore. It's if that would be the only case, then he would just say he found the pearl. Now he's dealing with the pearl. His master, there's something you have to do with the offer and the traders. In order to be able to get involved in the Margolius, you have to do something. You have to put away the offer, the sand, and the pebbles. Excuse me just 1 second. I have to do something in a second. I'll be right back. So now we have another thing here that Rabbi says. The Gerät come upon me. I spoke many times, and you don't impede Rasha the Torah Yonim B'Tvoim. In Rashi, in his commentary on Chumash, there are wondrous things. So we see here in Rashi, as I might take the Moshel from Medrash, Rashi also brings this Moshel of the Medrash, with many changes, many differences. And amongst the differences, like number one, he brings the same Moshel, but he says instead of the Loshen the Medrash. So instead of writing, like it says in the Medrash, that he has to feel around in the sand, he says Memashmesh, not lefashmesh really means to search in the sand. Memashmesh means he touched the sand. But the main difference is he adds another word, the kavri bekavri, and he sifts it with a sift. So the Rebbe says, where did the Rasha get it? Rasha writes it on his own. It's not in the Medrash. So the Rebbe does say, der prat from kavri bekavri, this idea that he uses the lotion that he sifts it in the sift, that is medrash, but not in the same medrash, in a different place. Was brings of the moshel in a different place where also brings the moshel. Aber dort is the klolos hamoshel b'signa nachal legamra. In that medrash, the whole moshel is completely in a different style than this medrash. When Rasha is maitik from dort blaze, or them prat from kavri bekivra, and Rasha seems the moshel b'chlolos is like the first medrash, and then he takes these two words from the other medrash, and we're not even sure that he takes it from that medrash. See that when the Rebbe says that he's mighty, he copies it from dort, from that medrash, the Rebbe puts in the question mark. Because it's not even clear that he takes it from that medrash. But let's say he does take it from the medrash. But it's strange. Why would he bring the moshel from the first medrash and then take two words from another medrash, which is completely written in a different style, and bring it in here? So why does Rashi write the word kevra b'kivra like he sifts it with a sift? Base, the second thing. Rashi brings Rashi also brings the two details of sand and pebbles, but with this difference. In only from the moshel, the monte belays chayil. In the beginning of the moshel, when he speaks about the margolius being in the sand, he says only the word in the sand. Nofla beinachel says the word it fell, the pearl fell amongst the sand. And then later he says, you have to be memashmesh b'chel, you have to feel around the sand. But he doesn't use the word tzveres, which is pebbles. When you see him on moshel, when he finishes the moshel, when he says, mishemotza hu mashleches atzveres, when he says, when he found the pearls, or the pearl, he throws away, here he uses the word pebbles. Under motnit chel, he doesn't mention the word chel. Now, other people, well, it's an expression, yes, I sometimes say this word, this word, no such thing. In the Rashi, everything is meduik. Everything, especially when he changes the expressions and he changes from the medrash, everything is meduik. So what's the union in it? Gimel, another difference. Even the last thing in the moshel, even the last thing of the moshel, Rashi changes from the way it says in the medrash. Rashi writes, "Mishemotza," when you find the pearl, when he finds it, he throws away the pebbles. Mashlich anshtot hiniach. In the Medrash it says he leaves the pebbles, and here it says he throws away the pebbles. Okay, so we have also these shaylis in Rashi, and this Sikha the Rebbe is not going to explain to answer these questions al pipshat in Rashi. Many times the Sikha first explains al pshuta shemikah, then he goes into deeper. Here it's going to go lechatchila. He said inyonim efloim, hidden things, no special things that we learn. Rashi has a lot of things to say, and that's the reason why he uses his expressions, but not in pshuta shemikah. There's probably another reason in pshuta shemikah why he does it, but that's not what the Rebbe is going to explain here. Then the Rebbe continues here. The Maral is masbir. Dos was Rashi the mont nitchel bam siv moshel. The Maral explains why in the end of the moshel Rashi says he throws away the pebbles and does not mention the sand. So he says like this: "Val divert kommen zum masbir sein verwas der posegli diber eid mi esof. Noch dem wir hebt on der zellen wegen Yeshuva Yank." He says there's a question here. Rashi says that he wrote about the Torah writes about Esav in order to get to Yaakov. And then after Yaakov, no more mention of Esav. Esav is not there at all. So he says, why? Weil alle Iberik, Espeterik, Yeshuva Esav, was mit Daten haben zum Yeshuva Yankov, seine Witzredes, was mit Daten usfangen. And what Rashi is telling us, that everything that happened till here, we need to know about Esav. Anything that happens from then on, even though the Torah tells us, we don't need to know them about the Yaakov. So if we don't need to know him, so as far as we're concerned, those are things you could throw away. So that's why the end, when he says, when you find the Magolis, means when you get to the point of Yaakov, so Rashi makes sure to say he throws away the Tzreides, because that's something that we don't need. And the Farber has the own group and Tzreides, and that's also a reason the Maral says, not only why it says throw away rather than leaving, why does he say pebbles? Because anything after the story of Yaakov, all the things that happened to Esav, as the Torah says in the end of Vayishlach, they're not mixed with Yeshuva Yaakov, with the Nyonim of Yaakov. That's why it says the word Tzreides. With Tzreides, just like pebbles, was Ein Margolius Eidavim Tzreides Rakim Achel. The pearl is not mixed with the pebbles. It's mixed with sand. It could be sand, but pebbles is not. It's not mixed with pebbles. That's why he says clearly he throws it away, because anything in that second half, which talks about the later generations, is like pebbles, which means the Margolis has nothing to do with it. And what do you do with it? You throw it away, you don't need it. So that answers the two shilas, why he says only tzveiras at the end, and why he says throw away. But the Pirish L'chur in the Pashtanik, the Rebbe says this shot is not understood. Because he's me talking Chiddush in the meaning of Mashlachat Tzveiras. First of all, according to what he says, there's nothing new in telling us that he has to throw away the pebbles. Because this idea, he said, what does he say? The reason that the Rashi says it because we have a question. Why doesn't the Torah continue talking about Esau? So to answer that question, we say because it's like the pebbles and we don't need it. But the Rebbe says, for that you don't need it. That that's understood, brought out in the beginning of the Moshe. Is nor in the beginning of Moshe. He has to feel around in the sand till he finds the pearl. So we know after he finds the pearl, we don't need it. So why does Rashi have to tell us to answer why Esav is not there? Because he's like tzveiras. But besides that, he's lepirusha kumtuis. According to his shot, it comes out as according to him that tzveiras, pebbles and margolis and the pearls don't get mixed. So even before you find the margolius, you don't have to get involved with the tzveiras. When the margolius hot means the way he said it, we mentioned before, he says that the pearl with the pebbles have no connection. So you don't have to look at the pearl. You don't have to look for the pearl into the pebbles at all. But from Loshen Rasha, from the Loshen of Rasha, as Dafke Mishemotzo Mashlachas, Rasha says that when you find the pearl, you throw away the pebbles. From that is Mashim is Muchach proves as Eidim Gefindim Agolis is the Uzge Mishtech with the tzveiras, that before you find the pearl, it is mixed up with the tzveiras. The Medrash says clearly that the pearl is thrown into, in other words, it's buried in the sand and the pebbles. And therefore, that you have to search around in the sand and in the tzveiras. So that was asking, how could he say that tzveiras is answering the question why we need anything about Esav, why we don't have anything about Esav later on? So Mela, the pshat of the Maral is not so simple. So if not so simple, we're back to the question. Why in the end, beginning of Rashi says it's hidden amongst the sand. Later at the end, he says he throws away the tzveiras. He doesn't say sand, he says he throws away the pebbles. And also in the Medrash it says that he leaves the pebbles, he leaves the sand and the pebbles, and Rashi says he throws it away. He's trying to tell us something. The Bible calls that. So the explanation that Rebbe is going to explain it is all up Chassidus in Ruchnis and Yonim. The Tachlis for Yeshuva Yankiv, the whole purpose of what's happening to Yaakov and the settlement and all the Yonim that went around Yaakov is not nur the Basetzes for Yankiv Bebonim as land Eretz Yisrael. It's not only that we're trying to tell us how it got to that they settled in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yankiv had gesagt Esav, it's more. Yaakov said to Esav, Ada Sharov El Adin Yisira. When Esav asked him to come along to visit him in his place, so he said, you go ahead till I will come to my master, which means to Esav, to say it. But das means, what did he really mean when he said, till I come to say it to you? Rashi says it means the Kiyum HaYid, he meant when the promise of the Eibusher will be fulfilled, that he says that B'mei HaMashiach will come. Pasuk says, V'olu Mishim B'Hartzion, the helpers will come to Hartzion, Lishpet as Haresav, to judge Haresav. That's what he said to him. The end will be, we will come to you, but we will come to judge you. So the whole purpose of telling the story of Yaakov and to tell us his Yishuv is not only to know when he's going to settle, but to know how he's going to get and what's going to happen at the end in the Yemei HaMashiach when we're going to judge Esav. And now we know why the Chazal gave this mashal. What does the mashal tell us? We're not talking about Yaakov's the settlement of things just on their own, for their own sake. Because if we were talking just about what's happening to Yaakov, as we asked in the beginning of the Sikha, that has nothing to do with knowing what happened to Esav. You don't need to know what happened to Esav in order to explain Yaakov. It's not like the mashal of the sand that you can't get to the Margolis unless you go through the sand. But here it's not. So that itself is not what we're talking about here. Not the negay what's going to happen to Yaakov. And so for that, you don't need to talk about Esau at all. Nor wegen the Shleimus v'tachlis welche Yanket auf Zukunft. Ove Seira. But what we need to know about Esau is because the tachlis of Yaakov is to come and be mishpat and judge Esau. And as he's going to explain later, which means that there's going to have to be a bitter. The Eibush is going to have what Yaakov will do. He will purify Esau. That's the tachlis. That's going to happen when Mashiach will come. Das wird der Greich, dafke durch der Avei de Inu mit Yeshuva Esau wird Esau will come. And we'll explain before that how could Yaakov reach the tachlis of when the Mashiach will come? It's only in connection to Esav and with Esav, as I'll explain what that means. Haste, so it means the tachlis for Shleimus for Yaakov means by halten in Esav. So it means that the Shleimus of Yaakov and the tachlis, the goal of Yaakov, is hidden in Esav. Because as we're going to explain, it's because of Esav, Yaakov reaches a very high madrega and reaches his tachlis only through working with Esav, as we'll see. But mainly within Esav is hidden the tachlis of Yaakov. So that's why we need the moshel. And the moshel, the question was, how is the moshel? In the moshel, it's hidden. And you have to come to it through the offer. But in the nimshel, Yaakov is not hidden in Esav. Now we have a nupshat, yes. We're talking about, the whole purpose is to teach us the tachlis of Yaakov. The tachlis of Yaakov is to be mavarer Esav or do things with Esav. So in Esav is hidden Yaakov. Und damit verrennt wird, werden verstandig, für was Teure rechnet durch die Yeshuva Esav mit Esav. This will also explain why the Teure mentions what happened to Esav and his settlements, and mentions the Malchei Edom, the kings of Edom, bis Melech Hadar, was is given by Shaul, till all the way Melech Hadar, who was in the time of Shaul. And we asked before, one of the things was, why is it negay to know what's going to happen later? Negay to know what Yaakov is doing now is negay what's going to happen years later. Now we understand. Because we're talking about later. While Shaul is given Mashiach Hashem, Shaul is known as the Apostle Mashiach Hashem, so he had Mashiach. We would have been Zeicha, weil durch ihm given the Kiyum from Volum Mashiach Batzin, which for the Saresav. If we would be Zeicha, Shaul would be like Mashiach, And the fulfillment of the Nevuah that will work with Esav and Mishpat Esav would have happened in time of Shaul. So that's the pshat that the Torah wants to tell us all about Esav, because the tachlis of Yaakov is the bitter of Esav. And that bitter is not only in this Esav's now, Esav, the whole, what happens later. Later, the Rebbe will say another pshat why he mentions it. But now he says it because it's all Negeya to the tachlis of the time of Mashiach. And up to Shaul, we could have been Mashiach, and then it would have been the tachlis of Yaakov. That's why he mentions it. Das ist der Rabbi and the zwei Inyonim in Moshel, offer and Tzreides. This, one of the questions was, what's the two Inyonim of sand and pebbles? What does that got to do with the Nimshel? I will understand. Weil in der Minje von Lishpat des Hareisef sind ja dort zwei Pfannen, suchen bitter Mishpat. Mashiach will come, we're going to look for Mishpat and the bitter to purify and to judge. There are two inyonim when we're judging and purifying Esav. Number one, that from the Esav et Nisbarebet loss of love. One of the ways things is that Esav will get a bitter, he will get his purification. Because like it'll be with other nations, they will be Nisbaret, they will be changed to good. Like it says, the Abisha says, then all the nations will have one language and they will all call in the name of Hashem and they'll all serve Hashem. And the same thing is going to happen to Esav. There will be an aspect in Esav which will become good, which will become changed over for the good. That's the bitter. And obviously that's going to happen to Yaakov, to the Eden. As hinted in the Maimer Chazal, Osit Chazer Litoyer, in the future the Chazer will become kosher. So the pshat is, Chazer is Aremes of Malchus Edom. Chazer represents the kingdom of Edom, which is Esav. And what does it say? He'll become Toyer, which means there will be an aspect in Esav which will become Toyer, which will be transformed to good. But then there's another thing. The Pchina in Esav is another Pchina, another aspect in Esav, which is Ra Gomor, which is completely bad. Medarfes Ma'abazayin, got to destroy it. Like it says, Beis Yaakov Eish, house of Yaakov is fire, Beis Yosef Lahova, and Yosef is flame, Ubeis Esav Lakash, and Esav is like straw. So the fire from Yaakov and Yosef will come, but Ochlum will eat them up, destroy them. There will be no survivor. So there's another aspect in Esav which will be completely destroyed. When das is the dogma to the zwei Inyonim von Offer and Tzreides. In other words, we're saying the Margolis is found in the sand, and you have to do something with the sand to get to the Margolius. So in the Nimshel it is in order to get to the Magolias, which we'll see means in the Tutis Takdusha, to the Yaakov, you have to go through Esav. You have to be Mevarer Esav. And the Moshel to be Mevarer Esav is through being hidden in the sand and the Tzreides. Yes, why are the two expressions? Because it refers to the two things that's going to happen to Esav. Offer is Adover Amayla Mas. The sand covers up. Like by Yasa, they're offer to verstell the Magolias. The sand blocks out, covers up, and blocks out the pearl. You can't see the pearl. So offer represents something that blocks out the good thing, something that's good. But because it's neat, but it's not bad. It's something that's not, can't say it's good, but it's not bad. I mean, we have to go, Rebbe doesn't say klipas nega, shows klipas atmeus, maybe it has to do, but what it means is there's something that's not ra gomor. It's possible that from something that's, if it's not bad, you might gain, it might be a good Indian. Just like a shell that protects the payday. So the shell you can't eat, but you could it comes in good use. Like it says, Mashiach will come. The strangers will be shepherds, be shepherds of our sheep. So these people could be used for the good. So there's something in Esav that could be used for the good, and that's represented. It's something that's, if it could be used for it, but it's now it's not. Now it covers up. But it's something that is not ragom that you got to get rid of. You just got to make sure to use it for the good. But the lineage from Tzreides is not nur adover amaylim. Tzreides is not something that just covers up. Bizas from them is nitok and tieles, and there's no good that could come from these pebbles. Nochman, not only that there's nothing good that could come. See, adover amazi, pebbles is something that could hurt somebody. The Lashon HaRogel b'Shas, like the Gemara says many times, by Niske Payment, when the Gemara describes the damages that come from the payment. One of the damages is Tzreides. If it steps on the pebble shoots. It goes. So the Gemara uses pebbles as an example of Hezek. So that's something that's no good. You have to be destroyed. So now we understand, to answer the other Shaila, since we're talking here, that we need Esav to show us that that the Aliyah of Yaakov is going to happen through the bitter of Esav. So the bitter of Esav is compared to Ofer and Tzreides, because there's two types of bitter, and one bitter is to change it for the good, and one aspect of the bitter is to destroy it completely. And the first one is the sand that could be used for good, and then the other one is the tzeiros, which is something bad. Now the Rebbe is going to explain. We said before that it is through Esav that Yaakov reaches his tachlis. Why is it like that? Why do you need Esav to Yaakov reach his tachlis? What is there in Esav that will make the Yaakov reach his tachlis? If you're not working with Esav, then Yaakov won't get the shleimus. When will he get the shleimus? When you have Lishbet is Hareis. So the Rebbe is going to explain it. Yaakov the Grech sein Tachlis Shleimus es wird mekuyim daftocha v'rav yavet zoyer. When does Yaakov reach a shleimus? When the promise of the Eibishter of Yitzchak, that the of the Eibishter v'rav yavet zoyer, he told the Rivka that the older one is going to serve, be the slave of the younger one. And when will that happen? When you will judge Yidden, the Eibishter, the Yidden will judge Esav. That's when you're going to be, that Yaakov is going to reach his tachlis. Why? The tam b'pnimi is favos Esav, and he's going to explain. The tam b'pnimi is favos Esav ongeruf Rav. The pnimi is the reason why he's called Rav. He said the Rav Yavetzoy. He's called Rav. Rav means a lot. Rav means a. So why is he called Rav? Number one, okay, he's the first one, but to call him Rav, you could call him the Pcher, the first one. Rav means that there's something more in him. That Esav has something special, a lot. And so we have to know why is it called Rav, and why is the Shleimus of Yaakov dependent on Esav becoming his Eved. So the Rebbe explains it. This alderech a mensch, just like we find a person, and a mensch person is a medaber. We find there are 4 categories in the world. Daimim, Tzameach, Chaim, Medaber. The earth, that's Daimim, inanimate objects. Then you have Tzameach, plant life. Then you have Chai, animal life. And then you have Medaber, the human being. Now, we see that the human being, even though he's the higher level, he's the Medaber, was onkim to essen, Chai, Tzameach, Medaber. In order for the person to live, you have to command the person has to eat food. What's food? Food can be made up of things which is inanimate object, like salt. You could eat things that grow. You could eat animals. So in order for a person to reach that he should live, so it says he has to come onto them. And he has to do what he has to do. And he gets his support, his life, he gets from the levels which are lower than him. Why? So it says the reason why, because the sheiresh of all these things, is a higher sheiresh than the Adam. We have a cloud that whatever is higher, Lamailo, comes down here lower. So the person is down here higher, so he's lower sheiresh. So the sheiresh of the food is higher. And that's why, in order for a person to sustain himself, you need to come to food. Because the you could ask, if the food is lower than him, how could the food which is lower than him give you something he doesn't have? Because when you eat it, and you eat it properly, you're mavader it. So when you're mavader it, you bring it back to a sheiresh, and in the sheiresh it's higher, so it could give you chayim. The same thing the Negei Esav called Rav, which means he's more, as if saying he's Rav over Yaakov. He is a higher madrig than Yaakov, but he will worship the Tzoyer, the younger one. Now the sheiresh for Esav is Hechef and sheiresh Yaakov. The sheiresh of Esav, the Maila, the source, higher than Yaakov, but the father says Esav the Pchet. That's why physically he was the firstborn. There's a mavoid in Kabbalah and Chassidus. It says in Kabbalah, Chassidus Sheiresh for Esav is in Elam Ateyu. Sheiresh of Esav Teyu. We know not. We have the Elam Atzilus Bri Yitzir Asiyah. Atzilus is called Elam Atikin. Higher than that is Elam Ateyu. It's a higher madrege. And not to get into Indian, everyone knows this. Whoever touches the Indian of Chassidus, that in Elam Ateyu there was Shviras Hakelim, and the Nitzutzes Agdusha from Elam Ateyu came down and became all these Gashmasdika things. The Sheiresh of a person is from Elam Atikin, which is Elam Atzilus. So the Sheiresh of Esav is really higher. But it's Hechef and Elam Atikim, which is Madrigas of Yaakov higher. So now we understand why, in order for Yaakov to reach a higher Madriga, he has to work with Esav. Because if you Mavarer Esav, it brings him back to the Sheiresh. And then the Sheiresh is higher. So Yaakov gains by being Mavarer Esav. When the Demas Yaakov is Mavarer in Tzutz Lagusha from Teya was einen Doin Esav. And therefore, when Yaakov is Mavarer, the holy sparks that came from Teya, that they're in Esav, when he's a milet to the Sheiresh and brings it back to the source, that so there's a milet, something special happens even in Yaakov, which is ticking. Then meet come to Tzutz and Tachas Shleimus. The that's a Shleimus. The Shleimus of Yaakov is to reach higher than his Sheiresh. Higher than the Sheiresh is Teyo. How can they reach Teyo? Because the Sheiresh is ticking. If you Mavarer Esav and you're working with Esav, so you get the union of Esav. Now, when Esav is down here, it's bad, but you're Mavarer him. See, he's down here, you don't feel his sheiresh, you don't see he's a rosher. But when you mavarer him and whatever is around him, then you elevate him to the sheiresh. In the sheiresh is higher, and that gives the sheiresh, that makes the netzutzes back to Tei, and that makes the shleimus of Yaakov. This is another reason, and in addition to what we said before, why the Torah mentions all the kings that will be after the time of Yaakov, all the way till Shaul HaMelech. Why does the Torah mention it? So before we gave a reason, because the whole Indian we're talking about here is, when we talk about Yaakov, we're not talking about Yaakov the way he is at this point. We're talking about Yaakov the way he's all the way to the end. So that's why he tells us about Esav all the way to the end. But now he gives another reason. While in them is merumas that Ilu Tzevelcha Yaakov the great Peter from Esav. Because in mentioning all these Malachim, all these kings, the Pasuk says this king reigned and then he died. Another king came and he died. Another king came and he died. Another king and he died. So it says in Chassidus and Kabbalah that this represents Teyu. Just like in Teyu, there was Shviras HaKelim, Kelim broke, whatever it should mean in Chassidus and Kabbalah. This is what happened here. Because Esav Sheiresh is in Teyu, and we see that in the kings who were kings and died. Okay, you do the Malchi Edom, the Sheishim, and the Malchim Kadmoin, the Teyu. The kings of Edom down here, their Sheiresh, their root was the way it's in the Sheiresh in Elam HaTeyu. But they're far Mocholifne Melech Yisrael. That's why these were kings before we had a king by Yidden, which means by Yidden they're from Tikkun, and Sheiresh of Teyu is higher, which comes before. The Baal is eine Beshesh Hecher b'Meila Frier from Malchi Yisrael. They were higher than Tikkun. That's why they were there before Begashmi is before the Malachim of Yidden. But the bottom line is now we have the understanding why the Shleimus HaAveda, when will it be by Yaakov when he's Mavarer Esav, is because if you're Mavarer Esav, you reach him all the way to the highest by Sheiresh. And that's why he's called the Rab, because in Sheiresh is higher. And that'll help even Yaakov reach a higher Madrega. So, but we just say that how you're Mavarer Esav, we'll see soon, is two ways. And they're both part of this whole thing. And this is what we do. This is the lesson to all the Eden in the time of Golas. The Yerida in Golas. Eden went down to Golas. Befrat Golas Achron, Golas Edom, especially this Golas, which is called Golas Edom. Edom is Esav. Yeshuva Esav et Esav. This is included. The Golas is included in when we talk about the Yishuv, the settling, and all the things of Esav. This includes this Golas. Why is that? What's the purpose of this Golas? You could take some Mavara in the Tzutzes, you know, for us to be Mavara, to elevate, to purify these holy sparks that came from Tay, and they came into the Gashmistic things, like in our food and things like that. And when we eat the food and we make a bracha, we eat Hashem Shemayim, it elevates the food back to its shadish. But with them, in the Shom and the Salah Nochecha from your shadish, if you elevate the food to its shadish, it means you connect yourself now to something behind you, higher than your shadish, because the shadish of a yid is from Tikkun, and you elevate the food, all the gashmas all the way there. While the shadish from the nitzutzes is in Teil. The nitzutzes akdusha, the holy sparks that are there that you elevate, they come from Teil. What's it say for shadish on the shama? Welch is in Tikkun, which is higher than the shadish of the shama in Tikkun. So that's why we have this golus, to be mavarer these nitzutzes, because that'll bring us to our tachlis, to higher than we are without this. Die Aveda from Bira and Nitzutzes, Chazal Maram is in the Moshel from the Margolis, Meshlachas B'Tich Ober B'Tich Atzeres. And this Aveda that we have to elevate the Gashmias, which means by elevating, we take out the holy sparks and we elevate it to Mila. That's hinted in the Moshel. That's what the Chazal want to tell us with the Margolis, with the pearl that's hidden in the, put into the sand and into the pebbles. The Margolis is a Moshel. If a Nitzitz the Kedusha was Sarage falling off of its service. This pearl is the Moshel to the Nitzitz Kedusha. The holy spark came down and is hidden in the Gashmias. The moshel is the pearl that's hidden in the sand and the pebbles. Why sand and pebbles? Like we said before, they represent two types of Torah Gashmi. Like we said before, offer is only cover, but it's not bad. That could be elevated. Then whatever is bad, that cannot be received. Offer, vice of the Dvorim Gashmi was on the place Milo master of the Netzutz Kedushin, Magolis. Sand represents this inyan of the Netzutzes Kedusha, which are hidden. The sand covers to be able to feel a seed in the Netzutzes Kedusha, which in the Moshel is you can't see the Magoli is because of the sand. When Aida Vidose kämpfen sie Mavara sein, die Netzutzes und Meiler sein L'Sheshe. So our offer represents these Netzutzes that a Yid could uncover the sand and elevate the Nitzuz, the Margolis, take the Margolis out, and in Ruchnis, it'll bring it back to church. The pebbles, as we said before, show us something which is bad. And many of them, there's certain things you can't do anything to take out the mitzvah's kedusha. It's in such a way that it's inside the bad. See, like this, gosh, something that's not bad, you could elevate the mitzvahs. Like food, kosher food, you eat it, so it's covered. You don't see the mitzvahs. But if you eat l'shem shemayim, make a bracha, you bench, etc., you elevate it. What about treifa food? You can't eat it, you can't elevate it. So in the normal way, you can't elevate it at all. So what's the eitzah here? Got to get rid of it. That's all he says. So these are things that you cannot elevate the mitzvah kedusha. Eich in zei is do margolis. True, the margolis, which represents the holy sparks, is is in that too. You have it also in this things which are bad. You have a nitzvah margolius, which is a nitzvah kedusha. Why do we say it's there? While on them kenezek and kiyim, nothing could exist in the world without having a nitzvah kedusha. But the nitzvah kedusha is behelam lagamra. But by these things, it's so hidden that there's no way to elevate it. Und die Sachen davon deichen, these things of deichen. Like if someone offers you kosher food, which is not holy, and you could elevate it. Someone offers you treifa food, the only way to have anything is tell them, take it away. Throw it away, don't take it. So the same thing Ruchni is, you cannot really elevate those mitzvot kedusha. Why? Because this is something that's ra, so you have to be deichen. So this is all when you're being mavada. So you mavada certain things, you elevate certain things, you gotta push away. Like we said before by Esav, parts of Esav is that you could elevate, like it says that Chazer will come toyer. Parts of it is you got to get rid of. Even after you reach the pearl, before you even get involved in the pearl, which is the mitzvahs, you have to already, before you get involved in the mitzvahs, you got to. The question was, why does Rashi say he put down the offer? No, not Rashi. The Medrash, says he put down the what's put down. He should have not said anything. We asked. When you get to the Margolis, finish. You get to be involved with the Margolis. Why do we need to say put away the offer? You have to do something. When you get the Margolis, you have to show, even while you're working on getting the Margolis, you have to show that the Gashmias of the Gashmias to get things has no meaning to you. Und das, was vernimmt sich, man sehen, why are you involved in the Gashmias, is nur bei der Zarus bekommen in the Zutze Steve Gdusha, was in the behalten, only to take a new Gdusha. So that's what the Medrash says. You're looking for the Margolius, and when you find the Margolius, then you got to like push away, be maniach, put away the offer and the traders. But you got to show that the offer and the trades, which represents the Gashmias, which covers up on the Margolius, which is the Nitzut, that all doesn't mean anything to you. And the far is der Hiniach as an offer chul and negate zum etzem marutz kriegen the Margolius. It seems like that it's not just that's what you do. In order to get the Margolius out of the sand, you got to do something. That's what he says, to put away the offer. It's not only something that happens after you find the Margolius. Rasha says it because it's when you're finding it. That's going to help. That's the proper way to find it, which means when Gashmi is simple, Gashmi is safe as mokin. Is important to a person. But the need not kennen for Zayarus Namek in the boy. If the Gashmis means something, the Gashmis itself. So not only will you not be able to really take out the Nitzutzes, elevate the holy sparks, but noch mehr. What das kann sein, die Saskas mit the Gashmis zu gesagt, mit Gorgedim sein, you read in the Neshama. If you think Gashmis is a Metzias, then you get involved in Gashmis on its own right. Not only it won't elevate the Nitzutzes, it'll lower your Neshama. It'll make you even lower. Only when you're eating and drinking, and all other gashmas to get things, which is included in the words of the pasuk, that whatever you do, when does it work and you elevate the gashmis, if it's in a form that you leave it, and lost stop them off of it, you drop, not you, doesn't say the word throw, you put away the offer of the traders, that means that they represent the gashmias of the gashmias. If that's something that you put aside, you don't care about it, then you'll be able to be mavared in the tzutzes of the Gashmias. And not only you're mavared the nitzutz, you mavared the Gashmi, and you elevate it to Heimat back to Chedesh Shefteyu, then you get your own shlemus, because then you're able to be pale on you. This will also explain the details, the changes in Rashi. But as far as the medicine is concerned, we have everything understood. If you look back, all the kashas are answered. But now we'll see the changes in Rashi. Well, the Bita is a Maramis, we know in Rashi you have Chassidus, so Rashi wants to explain this, make this change, because that explains the protest Seder Aveda from the Sabrurim. The whole thing is Aveda Sabrurim. The whole thing here is the bitter. The whole thing that we want to need Esav in order to speak that Yaakov is because the whole Inyan is the bitter that will happen all these years till Mashiach will come. But Rashi, who goes in more details, changes the words in order to tell us the details of what the Aveda, how the Aveda Sabarurim works. The Ikar Aveda Mbira and Sutas is in Chayil. See, one of the things we ask that when Rashi gives the marshal, he says the Margolius is hidden in sand. Chayil. He doesn't say in Shreidus. So the Rebbe says, you know why? Because the Ikar Aveda is in Chayil, and not in Shreidus. Main thing is the Chayil we said represents those things that you could elevate. Shreidus represents those things that you can't elevate. So the main Aveda is in Chayil. Not in the traders. Normally, unless special cases, but normally you can't get out the nitzos. So Rashi, the Aveda Seder Sabarurim that we have to work on is mainly with the first one, which is something that you could elevate. That's what the first thing Rashi says. You have to feel the sand. You have to look in the place. You have to feel around. That wherever the Margolius, which is the Nitzus Akdush, is found in the sand, so that's where you have to look for it. And don't go look for being Mavarer in things where the Margolius gefindt sich nicht. The Margolius is not there, but and the Margolius is not there, and Tzveris is bad. So we said before, it also has a Nitzus, but the Nitzus that's there is not the Gilui, and there's no way you can get out of it. So he said, you have to feel around in the Chayil. Look what's Chayil. That means what's sand, which means it's not Ra. And the Margolius is there, and you can get it out. That's the first thing you got to do. The Noch, afterwards, after you mavared it, you found it in the sand. When it's in the sand, the good is mixed with the bad. When they're bitter on the tzutzis, what do you got to do? Bitter on Nitzutzes. You Mavara. What does Mavara mean? We're always used to translate Mavara means to elevate. It doesn't mean to elevate. Mavara means to separate, to pick out. What we have to do is we have to get involved with the Gashmis, and those Gashmis that you're able to pick out the Margolis, which is the Nitzutz. So that's what you have to do. Basically, it's similar to sifting. He has to try why does Rasha add the words he sifted with a sift? Because this is the whole idea. The whole idea is that you're sifting. Since those things, it's bad and good together because it's not really completely bad. So what you got to do now is sift it and separate between the good and the bad. These make to material to the Margolius and Nitzutz until you figure out and you separate the Margolius, which is the Nitzutz. When the Noches Rasha Messiah al Derech Medesh, then Rasha finishes off. He does say at the end, Tzreiris. He says at the end, when you found the Margolis, then you throw away the Tzreiris. What does that mean? If we separate the good from the bad, so the bad, which Tzreiris represents bad, we have to throw it away. Separate, completely throw it away. Here, when we're talking about after you already separated by the sand, the good from the bad, now you have to throw away not only the tzreidas, which represents bad to begin with. The part that you're going to throw away now, after you take out the nitzitz kedusha, is called tzreidas now. Now it's similar to tzreidas. Why? And that's why Rashi at the end doesn't say the word chayil, he says tzreidas, because you got to throw away the tzreidas. As long as you didn't separate the good from the bad, all the gashmis, things like the sand. What is the sand we said before? Plays a hell of a nitzitz. It just covers up on the holy spark. But it's not something that's against, it doesn't allow you to take out the spark. So before we called it chayil. My goal is in the chayil, and that's where you have to look, because you only get to var for this. But if you went after you sifted, meaning these mavdil taking around, now you separate the good from the bad, those gufa verwandelt in dem chayil and tzreides. That changes that the sand is which is the bad part, is also called tzreides. You have to throw it away completely. Since you took out the nitzutz, so now it's only bad, even that part of chayil. So now, even to that chayil that you're going to throw away, he refers to nitzutz because you got it, because then that's the part after the good is separated, the nitzutz is separated. Now this becomes the tzreides also. Now, with this other mentors, when we apply this in our service of Hashem, it means like this. They beat it from the dover gashmali tachlisik as I dafkin the gate sumid and anoche. How can you really elevate the gashmis properly, completely? It could only be if you approach with the hanoche, with the mindset as the vorim gashmim tzad atzmam is neat nor v'zehom k'chshivas neat. That gashmi is on its own. Not only is it not important, but the far vindor megifin the magolis yinichas offer now. That's why as soon as you find the margolius, so the gashmis you got to get rid. Put it away. Nor say alein lulid in the tzutzes dusha, but since they zayin vitzreides. But it's not only now you got to put it away. See, in Medesh it says you got to put away the sand. Rasha is telling you got to put away the tzreides, because in order to be mevared completely, you have to realize that after first you got to realize b'chal the gashmis is not a mitzias, and after you mevared and you get and elamai you mevared the good, and then the bad. You have to realize becomes tzreides. In the fire, bald noch in the the margolis. That's why after you find the margolis is mashlich as a tzreides. You got to throw away the tzreides. Them that can make the margolis, and that's when you're able to take the margolis. If you throw away the others, the bad part, the gashmis shabagashmis, and you only use it for good, for gedusha, then you have the beauty of the nitzutz. Well, Chazal say teich ochal kaposi zorak. Says the Gaber Meir that he used to still, after Acher became Acher bad, he still continued learning from him. And he asked him, how could you learn from him? So he said, Teicha is like a fruit. I eat the inside and the shell I throw away. In order to be able to eat the fruit, which means to get it as you're supposed to, you got to throw away the shell. You got to see that the shell is not good, and you got to get rid of it. So same thing here. After you find the magolis, the other part that is the bad part, you throw away, and you got it. And then that's the only way you really could get the magolis to mevared in the tzutzis. Then the Rebbe continues. The Veda from Bira and Tzutzis Where did it start? This whole thing of Bira and Tzutzes from Yankov. Because from Yaakov started the Achone preparation to Matan Torah. The in Pashas simple pshat. At the Golos Mitzrayim, was is given the Achone to Matan Torah, Zichon gave for Yeridas Yankov of the Mitzrayim. Where did the union of the Achone to Matan Torah was Golos Mitzrayim? Where did Golos Mitzrayim start? From Yaakov. So the same thing in Ruchni is that Vayesheiv started with Yaakov. So why? Because Yaakov is the first connection to Matan Torah. What's Matan Torah? But the roof of Matan Torah is the main chiddush of Matan Torah is the Hamshachas B'chinas Halakush L'mayla Meilamis, that you're able to bring down godliness into the world. The godliness of Be'etzim is higher in the world. See, in the world there is godliness, but the level of godliness that's in the world is the level of godliness that shayches to Eilam. It's a very low level. It created the world, and it's in the world to give it chayes. But anything that's higher in the world, it's not in the world because it's higher and it's beyond the world. But Matan Torah made that you're able to bring godliness, which is beyond world, beyond Gashmias, and bring it into the world. And only then, when you bring higher in the world, these higher Yonim into Vel, then there's the proper bitter. In a nation for Mashlach Hasatzreis, then you throw away the Sreiris because world is not Tevis Mokim, but we bring down a Lakus that's higher in the world. From Lagabe, the Meirvas is Melubishun Elam, because Lagabe, this light of Hashem that's in the Welt, Hot Welt Kiviyochel Atvisas Mokim. Welt is a Metzias. Because if it wouldn't be Metzias, it wouldn't make it. The fact that he made it means that there's something there. And by the Aveda for Mashlach Hatzleides, but if you want to throw away the Hennezach, the Welt is not a Choshev Zach, and it's beyond the Welt, fordert sich as it Dvorim Gashmi is only ganz nicht for them, and then you have to reach a level that the Gashmi doesn't mean anything to you. Dafke mit seinem Meidel Kish la Maila Meidelnis, the Welt hat nicht kenntnis Mokim is dort in the Sinnes Keach, but the Aveda now beschleunigt. Only when you have a Eideliki, the godly light that's higher in the world, that could give you a Keach for this Aveda, and that's the Shlemus Aveda that you really, really are mavared it because Gashmis is not there. There's no cover up on the Margolius, and you're able to bring it up to a higher Madrid. And also the time for us, Rasha bring the Moshel Margolius Dafka Dom B'Pashasenu by Yankiv. This is the reason why Rasha brings this Moshel of the Margolius Dafka here by Yankiv, or need by Neich and Avram. In Medrash it says that the same thing happened by Neich and Avram. So why didn't you bring it before? The same Moshel comes to after Adam Rishon. The 10 generations, Torah talks about very short, so Rasha should have brought. Why did the Torah talk about what happened then? Who cares about them? Because in order to get to Neach, you have to go through sifting through the 10 generations. So in Pashup Shat, so why didn't Rasha say that Moshel there? Same thing by Avram. And the answer is, but even though they also, Neach already started to a certain degree being mavared in the tzutzis, and Avram, Neach had mavared given the Asara Derish Kadmu, Neach was mavared the generation before. Al Derech said noch by Avram it is even more. Also mavared. It does aber nicht given in an Eifen for Mashlach Hasatzreides, Miyodim and Eitel Magolus. It's not that you threw away the Tzreides. World was still Tevis Mokim. We're talking about Mashlach Hasatzreides, that the Tzreides, which represent the things which is not the Kedusha, should not mean anything. You just throw it away. So by them, Eich noch ein Birur in Welt is bevel geblieben am Metzias. They did Birurim, but the Welt still remained in Metzias. So where did it happen? It happened by Yaakov. So that's why by Yaakov Rashi brings the Moshe. Rafa became the Rashi the minion from the Asara Deis from Neichot Avram. But Rashi does bring it here. He does mention Neichot Avram. We said that it doesn't fit there. So the reason is, so Meram is to show as Dafke noch ein Birur from Neichot Avram, and he can sign the Birur from Yaakov. That the fact that Yaakov could do it is because Neichot Avram started, which means Neichot took it on the Birur. And the Rebbe is going to say 3 stages in this bitter. Neach made the bitter in the Inyonim with Anishaycha Seveld. Neach took things which are connected to the world, and he made a bitter. Fara Vedas Vinyan Neach is given Moller Chomer, because before Neach, what was the world? Robbery, thievery, bad. Neach Bavedos said, Pilgrim as Alzain Elam Kitakune, Ro Elam Chodich. Says Neach, and he came out of the table, saw a new world. He changed the world. It shouldn't be bad. People shouldn't steal. The Fara is the Krisis Vris with Neach and given in the gates, Kim Elam, but it's all things of the world. Didn't bring out that the Welt is not a Metzias. He made the Welt be normal. That's why David made this covenant that the world should continue existing and will never be destroyed. He made it with Noach. And Benegea, what the destruction that the existence of the world. 8 the days will be there, Leish Basin, nothing will stop. Why with Noach? Because Noach, at the time of Noach, the world stayed as a Metzias. Alamai is Good mitzvah. The roof of Avram Avinu is given. What the roof of Avram? Gilei lekusim vel. Bring godliness into the world. Not that the world itself should behave. Godliness in the world. He called out the name of Hashem, and he made other people call. Shleimer, the Rebbe adds possibly, one of the things that we could say Avram Avinu did, the Rambam says a goy has to keep his 7 mitzvahs. But then the Rambam says, really the way he's supposed to keep it, not because he feels that they're important and they're good for the civilization of the world. He has to keep it because Hashem said so. So Avram Avinu, he brought, not only made the world proper, that they should behave properly, he brought godliness into the world, and he brought that the 7 mitzvahs that they keep should be because Hashem said so. So it's a concept of godliness in the world. And only through these 2 things, later could be the beauty of Yaakov, the Achona, which is the Achona to Matan Torah, the Pelgrin is Olim Shechel and Gili Lakush Lamayla Mail. It's the 3rd target. The first target was Velt should be good. Second target by Avram, that there should be a Lakus in Velt, but still, which level of a Lakus? A Lakus is Shaykh to Velt. And here, by Yaakov, it came that what the beginning of Matan Torah brings down a Lakus which is higher than the Elam. So durch them is the Birur of Elam Mishlemus, that the Birur of the world is complete. Punkt wie das ist beim Birur and Tzutzis for jeder Eden in seiner Aveda. The Rebbe said, just like this is concerning the Birur and the Tzutzis, every Eden in his Aveda. As es darf sein in Nathan from Mishemotza who Mashlach is Atzrei, that when can you do the Birur and the Tzutzis? When you throw away the Tzrei, which means you realize that Gashmi is no Mitzias. As I say, B'negei Klal Yisrael. The same thing is not B'negei individual, B'negei Klal Yisrael. Klolos inyan Agolis B'Bira and the Tzutzis of Klal Yisrael. The whole idea of Golis is to have the elevation, the purification of the Tzutzis through Klal Yisrael in Allah's Manim became Agolis. Canal 5, like I said before, all times and all places of Golis. We state that in Golis Mitzrayim. So the whole purpose why we're in Golis to take out these Tzutzis. By Golis Mitzrayim it says, as V'achak Yetzer B'chush Godel Eden, after the Golis, he came out with a great treasure. But this means, Chassidus says, this means in the Tzutzis Kedusha was Modar Tarut Gnum. They went out with the Tzutzis Kedusha. So just like it was there, same thing in this Golis. The whole purpose is Bira and Tzutzis. The Rebbe, therefore, we know that such a ending is Mount Golis Mitzrayim, which we found in the Golis. Therefore, as soon as Mitzrayim was finished, which means in the Moshel they found the Golis, he's meant Keherafai in Baldarus Mitzrayim. In a second, in the blink of an eye, they went out of Mitzrayim. Chure, Rebbe asked, what's the island? What was the rush? The Shiva ended. At that time, already the working for Mitzrayim was finished. Eden were in Geshem, which is the best of the land. His bosses are in the gear. Need to bleiben noch a while in Geshem. So what's the problem if you stay a little another? Why do you have to in the blink of an eye? They'd stay in Geshem, then it wouldn't work. What's the problem? Is the Seder from Bira and Tzutzis. This is the Seder. Since the whole purpose of being Mitzrayim is Bira and Tzutzis, as soon you find the Magolis, you'll get rid of the Kretzayas. So here, as soon as the time came that they will finish the Birur, they get rid of the Tzreidas. And that's why you have to run away, go out from Mitzrayim. As I say, but Birurim and Gula from Gulas Achran to Gulas Achran, Gulas Hadim. The same thing when we finish the Birurim in Gula of this Gulas, which is Gulas Hadim. It's the same way it was by Yitzias Mitzrayim. The Pasuk says, "He made Seis Chameretz Mitzrayim and in the floor." It's the same way when he went on the Mitzrayim. I'll show you wonders in the next Gula. So the same thing here. As Bald, Dinor has come inside the moment the time comes. Is Meyad and the Golem right away will be redeemed. So all the Eden Aruzim Mikol Arosas, all the Eden from all the lands will go out. Will come with Mashiach and the Eretz Hashem Hashem Elokechabal will come with Mashiach Eretz Yisrael, the land where Hashem's eyes are there. Begula Mitzvah Hashlim the Kor of Mamish. Now this is very fast, so we're going through each thing here needs a beer, and we have to understand what is this thing. So that's different. That needs a share. Somebody to give the share separately, but this is push to learn the sikha inside. And then you got to learn it over, and you got to think about it, and learn the orders, etc., etc.
Rabbi Schapiro.